Well, thank you very much, Nectarios. And good afternoon, everyone. And welcome to this panel on RegTech Future Gazing, where we're going to be giving you a glimpse into the future of financial services. We're going to take you on a journey into the world of RegTech, a world where innovation, efficiency, and compliance converge to pave the way for a brighter and more secure financial future. In UK RegTech, we see what is a fantastically innovative, a creative sector with huge potential, and one whose importance we think is set to continue to grow as the volume, scope, and complexity of regulation increases, and as corporate and customer expectations change. But we here on stage, we're not the only ones who believe in the importance of this sector. Some of you who were here yesterday will hopefully have heard, as part of Chris Hayward's keynote speech, the exciting announcement of the launch of a RegTech platform, a collaboration between Innovate Finance and the City of London, and a platform that aims to facilitate strategic dialogue between vendors, FIs, and other key players in the ecosystem, with the overarching aim of amplifying the voice of RegTech in the UK. Right, so that was my preamble. Let's get into it. So my name's Chris Steele. As Nectarios said, I'm a partner in KPMG's enterprise risk consulting business. I lead our financial services regulatory consulting team, and I co-lead our RegTech community. I'm joined on stage today by an exceptional panel, all of whom have incredible experience to bring to this debate, including globally and outside of FS, so we should have a really rich conversation. First, on my left here, we have Edwina Johnson, who runs global expansion at Alloy. Edwina joined Alloy 5 years ago as Coup to build the company from seed to unicorn stage alongside the founders. Previously, Edwina has led startup bootcamp fintech accelerators in London and in New York, and co-founded an ad tech startup. And with a prior career in digital marketing, Edwina also angel invests in fintech startups, both personally and through Ada Adventures. Next to Edwina, we have Corinna Mitchell. Corinna is Symphony's general counsel. She leads the company's legal work and operations and is a member of Symphony's global executive team. And last but not least, we have Steve Pomfret, who is the CEO of Cygnetise. Steve founded the award-winning Cygnetise in 2016 after identifying considerable risks and inefficiencies in the traditional manual and paper-based signatory registers. And previously, he worked in operational change with a number of large banks and brokers, including Credit Suisse, UBS, Instinet, and Deutsche Bank. So, without any further ado, let's get into our very first question. And I'll come to Corinna first on this. Why do we need greater adoption of RegTech?
That's a great question. I think part of it is that regulators are actually setting the tone, and what regulators really want from the industry and from the people that they regulate is greater speed and security, so efficiency to be faster, to be more accurate, and to be more secure, more resilient. So we've seen loads of different regulations that are coming down the pipe from regulators in Europe, the US, and the UK, aimed at these things. For example, the SEC has released their T+1 regulation, which requires US securities to be settled within 1 day, and that's by May next year. The technology to do that, by and large, doesn't exist, at least not entirely. And so people need to get the technology, increase their processes, improve them, and overhaul them in order to be able to comply. So we can see these regulators actually setting the pace and saying, this is what has to happen. You, technology, businesses, banks need to catch up. Another example is in Europe, the requirements for interoperability for some of the largest internet service providers, which Europe has said that there has to be that level of interoperability, and that doesn't exist at the moment, and businesses will have to catch up. So I think that's one point. That's what regulators are requiring. And then the other is we work differently now, post-pandemic. Most businesses have at least a partial work from home, and the big financial services businesses have the option of either just saying you have to be in the office and go back to how it was, and we can be safe from a regulatory perspective there, or you can partly work from home, but you're not allowed to use technology, only this tiny little bit of technology, and that's what you have to do. Or they can adopt better technology to make interaction and work from home more regulatorily compliant. So for example, if people are communicating with customers on WhatsApp, on SMS, making sure that that can be recorded, which technology has a solution for that rather than banning it. Or, you know, I've had people come to me and say that they're trying to set up a meeting between 3 different banks. One bank will only use Zoom and another will only use Teams. And so they can't actually have a video call because they will refuse to allow their staff to use anything other than that particular service. So it's back to the old days of meet in person or maybe on a conference call. So I think that's why we need to adopt RegTech, because regulators are going there, and also we work differently now. And so either you shut down the way people work again, or you make it more possible to do so from home flexibly in a compliant way. That's my view.
That's great. Thank you, Corinna. Steve, I know you've got some thoughts on this.
Yeah, probably slightly more crude than that.
Never.
So, I mean, just from a business perspective, it's like when a new regulation comes and it chokes the business, it's like, you know, there's more cost that needs to go in for an operational standpoint. So, you know, you need to rearrange, you need to change the way you do things. And focus goes off of maybe revenue generation and other things within the organisation to just meet the regulation. So in order to do that, they normally chuck loads of people at it, hire expensive consultants, sorry. And, so in order to remediate that, then of course it's like, let's utilise some technology, and coined the phrase RegTech. So there's applications, there's tools available to help organisations, banks, regulated companies to operate more efficiently. Kind of as simple as that from my perspective.
I mean, the new regulation. I mean, I guess if we just pick up on that point around accelerating the uptake of new regulations, because obviously reg and tech, that's where we're coming from there. But the reality of where we are is that financial services is obviously a massively global industry, and different jurisdictions that we operate in are at very different points in the adoption of technology for reg compliance. And I know we heard in some of the other panels actually earlier today about how other regulators around the world are considering how best to address this challenge. So I guess the follow-up question I've got is around how does RegTech sort of face into the more global needs of the industry, particularly when the regulators themselves historically have been quite local and parochial in terms of how they think about regulation?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the trend with consumer behavior is to go towards a brand or a company based on your demographic alignment versus necessarily on a geographic alignment now. However, that's completely at odds with regulation, which is very local and very geographic based. So if you're a fintech, you're looking to expand and you're looking to bring on a customer base, either consumer or business customer base from many different territories, you want to do that efficiently and you want to do that fast, but you're tackling these kind of local regulations on a country-by-country basis. Even with passporting, that's still there's still friction that exists there. And to your point just now, like each of those regulators will be issuing new updates that you have to account for in your technology stack. So that's where RegTech can really come in, which is helping you manage all those different regulations on a different country basis and expand much faster.
Great. Yeah, and I think those difficulties in operating globally is one of the barriers that people often cite. You often hear these panels, RegTech panels, talk about some of the challenges. There are obviously lots of challenges and barriers to trying to make a change. So I guess my next question is around what needs to happen to drive greater adoption of RegTech to overcome perhaps some of those other barriers. I don't know if Steve, you want to go first on this?
Bigger fines.
Fines.
More fines. This is half joking, half not joking.
No applause.
Bigger fine. Look, so whenever we've kind of got a customer or like an incoming prospect that wants to adopt quite quickly, quite often they've just been whacked with a massive great fine. So, and if we're classified as a RegTech, then the adoption of RegTech is caused by big fines. Again, so very simplistic. But I guess alongside that would be closer monitoring, more transparent reporting, anything like that from a policing side of things, and I guess coming down harder on companies that don't adhere to regulation, then they're only going to step up the adoption. And again, that comes from basic economics. It's like, in order to meet the regulation, we either invest, we throw loads of bodies at it, we throw loads of money at it, and if we don't want to do that, or we'd rather do it cheaply, then what tools are out there? So this is like a trend that we see in our organization whenever something comes up. Then, and even like in cyclical, there's certain times of the year where companies, banks get audited. And soon after that, we get a lot of incoming responses.
But you don't want to be driving innovation out of fear. But I think that's the problem, because everyone is so terrified that they're going to get fined, or they're terrified that they're going to be pulled up, and it means that innovation is not adopted, and they're kind of being as like risk averse as possible. So I would disagree with that, and I think it's more like empowering your compliance team and actually saying, like, go out and challenge what is the status quo. Like, why are we doing this process? Why are we spending all this time and energy on this thing? Take it back to the fundamental regulation and think about what technology is out there now that we can do this in a much more efficient manner. And it's not just kind of cost saving internally, but the end impact on your customer is transformative as well.
So your carrot and your stick.
Yeah.
It's the same result.
Maybe both.
Where do you sit then, Corinna? If you're in the middle, then where do you sit on the fear versus empowerment discussion?
Well, they're both right, obviously. I have to say that. But I think, yeah, for sure, there is something about regulators having that intent to go through and make sure that people do need to comply. Similarly, there needs to be the opportunity of, like, we've got a new way of working or something new, how can we make it better for us, more efficient? And the one thing I would say is, if it's really rapid change in technology, then sometimes some businesses will take shortcuts. So there's a balance for the speed at which, for example, regulators say we're going to introduce these fines and require compliance. There needs to be a bit of time to allow the technology to develop and be there in time, and also to allow people not to take shortcuts or to do hacks effectively for compliance. But yeah, I guess they're both right.
Yes, how much time is the difficult one, isn't it? But I guess then, while we're on the subject of the role of the regulator, so as well as the fines and the encouragement and the sort of, the GFIN type approach where they're talking to each other globally, there are other things in the regulators' toolkits. It'd be interesting to get views on that. So whether it's some of the mantras we hear in some of the other panels around same risk, same regulation, being tech agnostic, where do you sit in some of the other things that are in the regulators' toolkits which can help promote and drive adoption of RegTech?
We have a pretty good relationship with the FCA, and they're really interested in finding out about new technology, innovative technology, and I know that they have like showcases and things like that. So in a weird way, we're kind of like educating the regulators. So is it the tail wagging the dog kind of thing? So they're interested to know what's out there, which might actually make them adjust the regulation accordingly and keep in sync with technology that's innovating. One of our kind of things with how we develop our technology is more obviously capitalist, client-based thing, but we adopt our technology in line with client appetite, with customer appetite, and I think regulation can be kind of adjusted to the pace at which innovation is like growing, and then they kind of work symbiotically together. That's not getting too deep, but yeah. So I think that the regulators are doing a pretty good job, or certainly in the UK, of looking at what is out there and how they can adjust the regulations just together with the development of the technology, which is pretty cool.
Excellent. Something like that, some symbiosis. That's nice to hear. Good to hear. Any builds on that?
Yeah, I think it is becoming more of a, you think traditionally the regulator and those that they regulate, and now, exactly as Steve said, there's a third party in the mix, which is the technology that's available. That's quite new. It didn't used to exist even so much 20 years ago, that regulators would think, here's a third piece of the puzzle, or here's an extra element that needs to be understood and can be helpful. But also, there is still an element of regulation, which is like, if your technology gets too close to a certain perimeter, you might become directly regulated yourself, and there's always that tension to think about when you're developing new technologies and solutions. It's something we always look at quite carefully.
Yeah, I think that's the opportunity for RegTech, is to make regulators feel comfortable with new technology and innovation before they've figured out how to fully regulate it, and also to give consumers confidence as well. Because if you're looking at things like different fraudulent activity that's occurring right now, it might dissuade consumers from using certain fintechs. But if you're using kind of secure RegTech and you're using latest innovation on that front and you can talk about it, then you are both giving consumers and regulators confidence.
Right. I'm going to take a little bit of a risk. The clock is flashing, but I'm going to try and squeeze one more question before we come to closing thoughts. And it's directly to the description of the panel around who is leading change. And so my question there is around, who is in either institution or a jurisdiction, who's doing this well? And what can the audience learn from whoever's doing this well?
I agree that I think the FCA is one of the more innovative regulators globally in the space because of their willingness to learn and actually getting hands-on with the technology that's out there.
Yeah. No, I was going to say that the FCA are the leader, and a lot of the regulators we talk to around the world, so we just follow what they do anyway, which is actually pretty cool from a country perspective. But every now and again, you see different bits come from different regulators in different jurisdictions, which it goes back to the second question about how things differ.
Yeah, I'd say the MAS is also quite innovative in their approach. So the Monetary Authority of Singapore, they definitely they're interested. They're trying to look to the future, and that's another one to watch in Asia. I think they're very interesting the way that they regulate.
Yeah, I think it's just, for me, it's being active. So that, like the MAS, HKMA, FCA, they're in the market, they're talking, they're listening. And it's that proactivity which I think can encourage fantastic startups and bigger companies like yourselves to really be in there and really to be innovative and to really think about the problems rather than just sort of trying to necessarily turn the handle in perhaps a more old-fashioned way. Right, so if we move to a sort of wrap up then, let's try and get some closing thoughts. So, I mean, hopefully everyone is clear. I mean, I'm very clear that what the financial service industry is going through is really a significant transformation. And yeah, RegTech is a big part of that. It's a supporting factor to that. But it feels like in terms of where that change is going, we're really, well, for me, we're just at the sort of foothills of that change. There's a huge amount more to do. And to continue to make progress, I think we've got to be bold, we've got to be resilient, and we've got to try and think differently. But I'd be really interested to get the perspectives, closing comments from each of you on what your personal vision is, perhaps, for the future of RegTech. And maybe I'll start with you.
Yeah, well, I'm going to go with don't be driven out of fear, be driven out of opportunity. Yes. Yeah, think what RegTech can do for your business beyond just avoiding fines. Can help you scale, can make your consumers happier, your customers happier, and then also give your regulatory bodies assurance.
I'm really interested to see how regulators will use technology themselves to drive their regulatory purpose. So fascinating, the idea of an official British cryptocurrency. What else can regulators do using technology to regulate better themselves using the technology? I think that is a really fascinating area. We might see in the next 5 years or so more use of AI by regulators themselves to process information and flag and see regulation. That would really interest me.
I actually think it's the future. It's the main part of RegTech. Maybe FinTech will become part of RegTech. It's, in seriousness...
We do love RegTech, yeah.
In seriousness, I mean, there's enough payments applications out there. Companies have to survive. It is really important to reduce risk of fraud, increase control, and reduce efficiency, and increase efficiency. That is the crux of a business, and where there's more regulation coming in, you need RegTech to basically make the business more efficient and enhance controls. Now, the whole ESG thing, so everyone's been focusing on the social thing and the governance thing. The government have just released an act to where every organisation needs, it's going to become illegal not to protect against fraudulent activity. So there's going to be so much focus, in my opinion, on the S and the G bit of the ESG, and companies need a greater responsibility, and therefore they're going to have to need RegTech to make their companies operate with a decent business case, I think.
Fantastic. Some great final thoughts there. So I think that just remains for me to thank the panel, thank Edwina, Corinna and Steve, and ask you all to join me in giving them a big round of applause.